History was made this afternoon in New York City with the first ever criminal arraignment of a former U.S. president. Former President Trump pleaded not guilty to 34 criminal counts, including felony charges of falsifying business records. The charges were handed down by a grand jury convened by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Bragg's office investigated the circumstances surrounding a payment made on Trump's behalf to actor Stormy Daniels in 2016 in exchange for her silence about an alleged affair. Here is some of what Bragg said after the arraignment hearing.
34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
We have full team coverage tonight in New York City. We have our chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes, here with me on set. We have senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge and investigative reporter Graham Kates outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. And in West Palm Beach, Florida, where Donald Trump is expected to go next, CBS News chief Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Thank you all for being here. Graham and Catherine, I want to go to you. Catherine, set the scene outside the courthouse for us. I know you've been standing outside it all day.
Well, Caitlin, good to be with you from outside the courthouse. Earlier today, there was a tremendous sense of tension, kind of a combination of anticipation and then also apprehension as history was about to unfold. This was a meticulous security operation. Some of the security, and I've worked in this space for 2 decades, was highly visible. That is by design to be a deterrent, and some of it was not visible, but my trained eye could see several plainclothes police officers moving through the crowd, and they also had members of something called a TACU. This is a Tactical Assistance Unit. They put up these fixed sky cameras for surveillance, largely for crowd control, property damage, and most importantly, to identify emerging threats so that the NYPD federal law enforcement could have that surge capability. But I think most of us are very pleased to report that the day went very smoothly. There was a protest just about 25 yards from where Graham and I are standing right now. There was a barricade down the middle separating the pro-Trump and then the anti-Trump protesters, but there was really no violence, sort of no confrontation to speak of. And I'm just going to hand it over to Graham. Maybe you can bring us in on sort of the movements inside the courtroom.
Inside the courtroom was an entirely different atmosphere. It was very quiet before former President Trump came in. Everyone was waiting for just this one hearing. The reporters were led in first before pretty much anyone in the courtroom. About 60 of us surrounded by court officers and Secret Service agents who lined this kind of middle row where defendants walk down, and then we're all along the walls. This is a really old building. There's like paint peeling from the ceilings. It's really never had a circumstance like this before. And then after about 45 minutes, with very little fanfare, there came several of Trump's lawyers, and with them, Donald Trump himself. He didn't say a word as he walked in. He kind of pursed his lips and didn't make any faces and stared straight ahead and walked and sat down in a chair where thousands of criminal defendants have sat before him. But in this case, the criminal defendant was the former president of the United States.
And Graham, that courtroom that you are describing, of course, is a far cry from Mar-a-Lago, where the former president is now headed to give a campaign speech tonight. That's where Major Garrett is. Major, it was striking today to obviously see that image of the president in the courtroom, but also the image that his campaign put out today, this fake mugshot, and trying to fundraise around this. Tell us a little bit about what that says about the state of his campaign, what they are hoping to get out of this, and what we may expect to hear about this tonight. There was no gag order issued.
Correct. There's lots of things to talk about, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone, from Mar-a-Lago, the ballroom, where at about 8 o'clock Eastern tonight, the former president will give remarks about this history-making moment. And it is a momentous moment for all of American history. But as Graham indicated, there was something about it that was also mundane and highly procedural and formal in that New York courtroom. That's as it should be. president's not above the law, he's not beneath the law, as many people have observed. And the law and his ability to assert his innocence and all of his due process rights have been respected on this day and will be respected going forward. And the former president's deportment today, I think, is also reflective of the two worlds in which this story and the former president's attitude about it exist simultaneously. The one world is the world of legal reality. And I know from my reporting and from Robert Costa's reporting that the president's attorneys have counseled him to dial it back, at least personally, not on social media, but personally, to treat this with due seriousness, to look as if he's taking it seriously. The political side of Donald Trump and the Donald Trump universe wants to monetize this moment. And as soon as he entered the courthouse, or almost as soon as he entered the courthouse, boom, there was an email sent out to supporters requesting donations, $47. You can do the math on that. He's the 45th president. Joe Biden is the 46th. If he's reelected, he would be 47. What do you get for your $47? You get a T-shirt that says it's the mugshot of the former president. It's not the mugshot. No mugshot was taken. It is a fake photo. It is a head fake, if you will, generated by the campaign to stir up immediate donations for the campaign and for whatever attendant legal fees might arise from this or other cases. So those are the ways in which Donald Trump, the person, the former president, his legal team, and his campaign arm exist and actually are trying to coexist in this historic moment.
And Nancy, the former president's he hopes, opponent is Joe Biden, the president. And it has been such a split screen this week to see Biden, out on the road, going about the presidency. He seems to not be commenting on what we're seeing unfold in Manhattan.
Not at all. In fact, he had another opportunity today. Reporters tried to ask him about it. They tried to ask the vice president about it. She had nothing to say either. The press secretary, the White House press secretary, was peppered with questions. She also punted, said this is a legal matter. We don't want to get involved. The White House doesn't want to do anything to step on what they believe is a very bad moment, ultimately, for Donald Trump. And it was interesting to see Democrats following suit. I mean, typically, you would anticipate that Democrats on Capitol Hill would be gloating. They would be doing a victory lap about this. Here is probably President Biden's most likely opponent in 2024, and yet Chuck Schumer, the leader in the Senate, who is not known for pulling punches, put out a 2-sentence statement. He's also the senator from New York, by the way. Very milquetoast. I believe that Mr. Trump will have a fair trial that follows the facts and the law. Ho-hum. Clearly, they don't want to take any risk of becoming part of this story when they think Donald Trump's doing a great job all by himself.
That's so fascinating about Schumer, because obviously he's known for not pulling back there.
He's a New York brawler when he wants to be.
Exactly. Kind of staying in New York, Graham, I'm curious about why there was no gag order issued here.
So this was interesting. The judge said that generally he's not inclined to issue gag orders because he wants to protect the First Amendment rights of defendants. But he said that this was particularly important in this case, that he was cognizant of the fact that the defendant sitting before him was a candidate for president of the United States. And he didn't want to, in particular in this case, suppress the candidate's First Amendment rights. But he also said, this is something we can revisit if it becomes an issue. At least for now, though, they are not going to issue a gag order.
And Catherine, what are we hearing from Trump's legal defense? They spoke after the arraignment today.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Caitlin. We heard from this new attorney, Todd Blanche. I spoke with a lawyer last evening who has worked with him in the past and described him as someone who was a very fierce, white-collar criminal attorney, very much on the offense, forward-leaning, not afraid to sort of wade into a difficult fight. And he thought his view in this case is that the indictment was overreach. Blanche told reporters as he left the courthouse behind us that his client, the former president, was frustrated. He was digesting this indictment, but he would fight on. What we've heard consistently from members of the Trump legal team, albeit they are working other cases, specifically the classified documents case at Mar-a-Lago, is that they wanted to review this indictment, Caitlin, to see if there was what they described as a fatal legal flaw. And it has to do with something called the intent to defraud. What they told CBS News is that in order to obtain a conviction, the prosecutor here would have to show that it was not only an intent to deceive somebody, but it was an intent to defraud where something of value like property or cash was denied an individual or an entity. We got a little bit of insight into that today from Alvin Bragg at that press conference where he talked about tax issues here in New York. Maybe that is what he's hanging the intent to defraud on, but we know the Trump attorneys are going to look at that very aggressively. There was another case involving this very same New York statute, and it went up to the Supreme Court, and the conviction was ultimately tossed out because it was found the prosecution had not shown that something of value had been denied as a result of the action.
I mean, that's interesting. Kind of going to what you were saying earlier, Major, I think it's kind of important to remind our audience that this is just one of a handful of investigations into the former president right now. I know you have been talking to people in his orbit. How concerned are they about these other investigations that could unfold?
So let's go through the investigations that are not based in Manhattan. One is in Fulton County, Georgia. That is a grand jury. A special grand jury was impaneled. Another grand jury will look at the underlying evidence presented to that special grand jury about whether or not there was activity that implicates a crime involving the former president and trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election result in Georgia. Then there is the special counsel's investigation in Washington, D.C., also where a grand jury is involved, investigating two matters. The handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, where I am right now, after Mr. Trump left office, and his activities before and during January 6th. Are there criminal implications to either of those cases? Was there obstruction of justice? Was there mishandling of documents? Did the president knowingly tell the country that the election was stolen when he knew it wasn't, and all the, therefore, activities, including a riot on Capitol Hill, therefore emanate from that knowledge and that motive? All those questions hang out in the air. What did the president know? What did he do? And what was his knowledge of the underlying facts? All of those investigations present real legal jeopardy for the former president, and his inner circle knows that. If they were to rank for you, Caitlin, and the country, their level of concern, it would be Manhattan DA case 4, Fulton County 3, then January 6 classified documents 1 and 2.
A lot to still unfold as we go forward. Major Garrett, Nancy Cordes, Catherine Herridge, and Graham Kates, thank you all so much.